Hello, Nick Zuccarello here with nickzook.art, and in these next few videos, let's take a look at how we can go ahead, create our own custom design, create our own custom head, and get everything ready and get it set up so we can actually animate this thing. So the first thing we're going to talk about is getting things set up. We're going to go into the blocking phase. We're going to block out a very rough body, at least know the proportions of our character and know that it works scale-wise. After that, we'll go ahead and take that and then we'll refine that to go ahead and build a good looking concept that we can use for a front and a side view, get everything set up so we can keep ourselves on target and stay on model. Then we'll go ahead and do our primary forms, get everything roughed and get everything blocked for the head. From there, we'll move to secondary and tertiary forms, get the high resolution sculpt fixed up. And then after we have a good looking head sculpt, we can go ahead and take those results into our program of choice where we can do some resurfacing. I'm going to be using Maya for the resurfacing component and show you everything that you need to understand about how we can animate this thing for the eyes and the mouth. We'll also take a look at how can we construct what is considered a mouth bag, so it's the inner part of the mouth. And then we'll take a look at how we can build some teeth and a tongue and get everything set up so we can actually animate this thing, and then even talk a little bit about the animation process and everything that you need to know from a character artist standpoint for getting a high quality head built and getting that put into your game. So let's go ahead and get started. So before I start to show you all the different tools and techniques for how to sculpt a head, I wanted to show you an artist that I really admire his work. His name is Nakpil. He used to be an artist that worked at Industrial Light and Magic, ILM. And if you've ever seen the Avengers movies and you've seen the Hulk, you've seen some of his work. But anytime I get to see some of his behind the scenes work and see some of his thought process for how he approaches sculpture, I think he's got one of the best methods out there. And I don't think he's invented it, but he's able to articulate these ideas very succinctly. And so I wanted to point you to a Gnomon video that he has where he gives a talk, and specifically this section in the talk that talks about hierarchy of forms. It's going to tie in directly into the different processes that we go into whenever we're going to make our head. And we're going to be talking a lot about primary, secondary, and tertiary forms and what that means. So without further ado, let me go ahead and play the video for you and let him speak for himself.
And lastly, hierarchy of forms. So I'm going to use this creature, the swamp creature, Swampy, as my example. So starting off with primary forms, essentially they're, I'll just loosely read from what I have there. Essentially forms that are the foundation of all the other shapes are built on. So it's my thinking of primary forms, and it's different per artist. Like used to be, I would consider primary forms to be like, if I were to break this down, it would just be like a sphere and a sphere, like just very way simplified. But for me, my definition has now become sort of whatever traits or structural elements that define a character. Like when you do a squint test from a person, and you can kind of see what they look like because of their primary shapes. That's what I put in there. So they establish the structure, readability, and proportions as well of a character or design, and they essentially set the stage for the rest of the forms, secondary and tertiary. And so this is just how I would. I'm a very shapes-based modeler, I guess. So Modeler has been perfect for me because I could just use primitives to just quickly block those shapes in versus, there's also a side of me that's like, I can just model from a sphere and pushing and pulling it out, but this is sort of like how I really think and deconstruct things anyway as shapes, so it's been perfect for me in this sense. So let me play the video again. Oh. So I'm just here in Modeler just kind of duplicating the primary forms and creating the secondaries because.
Hey, before we go on to the secondary form, one thing that I wanted to note is working with students over the years and people that are just getting started with modeling. I see a tendency for people to just gloss over this primary form stage. And if you start to listen to various professionals out there, and it could be in sculpture and it could be in the form of people doing illustration, there's a lot of different applications for this where if you don't get the primary layout and the primary forms done and get that done correctly, it kind of hurts you all throughout the rest of the project, right? So no matter how much detail that you put on something, how much poor details you put on there, how many wrinkles you put on there, it will never save the overall form and the shape of this thing if you don't nail this primary stage right off the bat, right? So I think people tend to look at this and they go, oh, those are very simple shapes. It's just some cylinders and some spheres and cubes, and they're kind of mashed around. But they don't give it the correct emphasis for things, right? So if we're going to build a house, we need to make sure that the foundation is sound. And if we don't have a good foundation, that entire house is going to crumble on us over time, right? So that's the primary form stage. You really, really need to pay attention to this and give it a whole lot more time and effort, and make sure that everything feels nice and solid before you start moving on to the secondary forms and the detail forms. So I've just seen that so many times with students that I wanted to point it out to you and just call special emphasis to that. So do not discount that stage.
I'm lazy and I don't want to like create new layers over and over again, so I'm just quickly copying what's there and kind of just warping it in place. Tertiary shapes. What are tertiary shapes? A lot of people mistake tertiary forms or shapes as surface detail. You know, when I see a lot of character artists speak on tertiary forms, they're actually talking about surface detail, like pores or like hyper noise and stuff like that. Well, in my opinion, you know, and again, it's different from different artists, right? For me, tertiary forms define the surface of the character in terms of like, what type of skin is it? If it's sort of say like an older skin, you know, it's a little flappier maybe. So those tertiary shapes, the way those forms kind of interact, the water inside the water balloon may be a little heavier, right? Like there's more gravity affecting those forms because it's just looser. So this is just the phase of the process where I'm thinking about that, the tertiary forms phase. While these forms provide essential visual interest, now here's the key part of tertiary shapes. It is crucial to apply them thoughtfully. I've come into instances on my own that I've lovingly put all the primaries and secondaries, you know, like I'm just so happy with it. I get into tertiary forms phase and it's just all obliterated because I get so happy, you know, like I just zoom in and lose sight of like the bigger picture. So I always try to zoom out and just kind of use these tertiary forms to accent what is there, not to overpower, right? That is a key thing to remember. You're using these smaller details to accent the bigger forms. Secondary shapes should accent primaries. Tertiary shapes should accent secondaries. So that's how I think of things. You know, say for this one, just showing how I would do tertiaries in Modeler, I would select all my secondaries, smooth them out together into sort of a more organic shape, you know, setting it up for the tertiary details using the build-up tool. And it's really fast in VR here. And so I'm starting to kind of graft the areas where there could be sort of like radiating wrinkles, and then, you know, fast forward, obviously. I'm not that fast. I start putting in, it's sort of a rinse and repeat process. I would put in these forms, merge it, smooth it, and then put it again. But again, even in this phase, I'm still thinking of water balloons. How do these small, tiny details press up on each other? Because if you zoom in on an orange, right, it's like the orange example, like it's still forms. It's still a series of beautiful forms.
Okay, so the one thing that I wanted to emphasize about what he just showed you, these primary, secondary, and tertiary forms, we've already talked about the primary being super, super important for the entire process of what you're building. He touched on it as well that each one of these forms and these different stages, they need to build on each other and they need to work in harmony with each other, right? So if we're building something for games, and that's primarily what I'm speaking to you about, is building content for games, we need to think about the camera and the distance from the character. I think you heard him say something about the squint test or doing something like that. That's something that I tell my students all the time. Just go ahead and squint at something, and the big shapes come forward, the detail goes away, and you can make sure that you've got the right amount of detail in there. So I think this is something else that I see in students when they're getting started, or people that are new to modeling. How do you know how much detail to put in each one of these stages, right? And so your primary forms, if we can take a look at this, and we'll take a look at the character from let's say this distance here. The primary forms should read from, you know, a far off distance. And so if we get out here, the bigger forms that I start to see is something about the bicep, maybe the shape of the stomach and things like that, right? As secondary forms come in, and I haven't really finished this sculpt at all. Let me hop on over to this one where I joined everything together. This one has a little bit of secondary work where I'm starting to build some of the wrinkles and things like that on his knuckles. I do have some separation between muscles here, but I have worked on the head a bit more, right? And so I do have these secondary forms, and then the secondary forms you should see should read from like a medium distance from the camera. So as I get the camera back a little bit more, you could either, again, you can do the squint test and you can see this, or you can just take the model and you can push it back in space to kind of understand if things are reading correctly or not. Like I've got this nasal labial fold right in here, and this is still showing up pretty heavily from this distance, and you can even get a sense of it from there. So that's what I'm considering something about the secondary forms. And there's certain forms, maybe where the edge of the ear meets this part of the head, and I will emphasize that. Maybe I've got a little bit of this line that goes underneath the lips here. You can still see at a distance some of these forms read in this like fin structure that he's got here on his head. So that's a way that I can test these things and make sure that they are working from like a medium level distance. And as we get in closer to this, then we start to worry a bit more about that surface detail that we've got going on throughout the entire surface of the character, right? The other thing that I've noticed about this process is that whenever you get to the tertiary forms, and obviously you should be saving that for last. I know it's tempting at times to put this detail on there because it looks really cool and it just produces that wow factor immediately. Like I was saying, no matter how much tertiary forms that you have on there, it's not going to save your primary and secondary. And so with the secondary, you need to make sure that those secondary forms read first and then go to the tertiary and add those to your sculpt. Once you do that, and I've noticed this for myself, I've seen professionals do this as well, you put the tertiary detail in there and you usually have to go back and rebalance some of the secondary detail. So the forms that you saw on the secondary forms and they were reading correctly, you put this detail on there, and if it becomes too overpowering, that could tell you something about what you are sculpting. It's an indicator that maybe you've pushed this just a little bit too far, or if you want to keep that really high fidelity on there for the tertiary detail, then you need to go back to the secondary and maybe emphasize some of those shapes, push them a little bit harder, and get those to read a little bit better. Okay, so I know that's a lot of information at the very beginning, but I think it's really important as you set out and you start to build these forms that you're going to be working on to build your design. You really need to have some of these concepts in mind as you're going through each one of these stages. And again, try to trust the process. I've seen over and over again some of the best artists out there, they use this, if you want to call it a formula, they use this formula for using really high quality primary forms, moving that onto the secondary form stage, making sure that's sound, and then going to the tertiary forms and then balancing everything and making sure that everything's in harmony. And I think if you keep these things in mind, you're going to end up with a really strong sculpt and you're going to come away with a really strong design. And I think if you keep following this process over and over, you're going to see yourself grow as an artist very quickly. So I know that this project's probably a little bit unconventional in the way that I'm approaching it, but What I wanted to focus on whenever I made this head was actually putting it into VR and seeing some of the quality level that I needed to hit to get the fidelity that I wanted when I get up really close to this. So I was really focusing on just the overall shape of the head and making sure that I could open the mouth. I've got a set of teeth and everything else like that. So I went ahead and did some animations, and then this is basically just a test. And now I need to take all the combination of what I've built already and then combine that together with the body. So you might do that process. I think in a normal workflow, you probably building the body at the same time that you're going to do the head. So what I'm going to show you is that it is possible that you could do a really deep dive onto the head and you can combine that with the body. But I think something that's really important if you're going to do that is that you need to have the entire body with the head blocked out at a pretty high level. That way, you know that the head actually sits on top of the body correctly. There's nothing weird with the proportions, and then it'll reduce the amount of rework that you might have to do. So go ahead and do the blocking process, block the entire character out, and get that going with the head. So something that I tell my artists on a very regular basis is at the beginning of any project, scale is one of the most important things, especially if you're going to push something into VR, because VR, you have a true sense of what scale is actually. So these are some of my tests that I did inside of Unreal. I usually always start with the Unreal Mannequin, and then I did a little bit of combination, maybe some Maya together with ZBrush. But this is like the first iteration of what I built, and in my head, I thought maybe these would be the cool proportions that I would have. And was just slightly bigger than the mannequin, which is roughly about 6 foot tall. So this character, I thought it was going to be pretty big and imposing, but as I got it into VR, that thing kind of changed quite a bit, and it didn't really give off the scare factor, the feeling that I was going after. So then I tried a couple different ones where the next one I scaled it up and got it to about the right scale that I was looking for, but he still didn't have some of the imposing kind of proportions that I was looking for the body mass. And so this was the final version that I put together here. And I just stole some stuff from a previous project that I had and threw some gear on it just to get a sense of what this thing might look like. So I do think it's pretty important that you make proxy models and you throw those into Engine as quickly as you possibly can, just to establish what is going to be the scale for the character, right? Because any work that we can do at this stage is going to be a whole lot easier and it's a whole lot more malleable to be able to change and push and pull shapes. As you start going further along in the production pipeline, it becomes way more painful to go back and do those changes. So do everything that you possibly can to establish the scale. And as we talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary forms, this is all the primary stuff, right? So I've got maybe some secondary stuff in here, but then it's really just to kind of sell the overall look and feeling of this thing. So the quicker you can get it in an engine, the quicker you can evaluate things with your team and be able to hand some stuff off like this to other teams, the quicker that you can start to build art that you feel confident is going to move forward. There's not going to be a whole lot of changes to it. So make sure, again, this stage is really, really important, right? So this is part of the primary form process. And again, the very first thing that I would do is get some rough shapes, push them into Engine, make sure they're working, and then you can feel a whole lot more confident that you can take this rough form back into ZBrush or Maya, and I can move forward with that, and I'm not going to have to do tons of rework. So take the time, put it in the engine, and make sure you're checking that part. Okay, let's go ahead and start talking about the blocking stage. So you can see I'm inside a ZBrush here, and my goal for you is to get some different shapes that represent the different forms that we have. So you can see right now I've got what is the beginning of the deltoid shape. I've got a combination of bicep together with tricep, and I've got some of the different forearm muscles to make this shape here. We've got more of a flat shape that's going to represent our wrist going in combination with the palm. We've got our different fingers. And so this should be pretty good to rough things out. And if I was able to join those together with Dynamesh, I could start sculpting on this stuff immediately. I wanted to show you that I do have on my YouTube channel. If you go to my videos section and you scroll down a little bit, you'll see this video says blocking in forms in ZBrush. So you can see that we've got all the forms roughed out, and then we can go ahead and take those, join them together with Dynamesh, and then do a little bit of sculptural work over the top of it. So that's basically the process that we'll be using for this. So if you want a really in-depth look at all the different tools and techniques that was used for the blocking stage, go ahead and watch that video and it will explain everything you need for that entire process. I'm going to try to give you a little tiny mini breakdown of that right now real quick. And it's basically this. I'm going to show a sphere that I appended in here. So inside of ZBrush, you can come in here, you can go to the append section, and I just appended in a sphere. I do have the undo history on here. So basically I took the sphere, and then with the gizmo tool, I just raised this thing up. And so you can see I pushed it up, scaled it in a little bit, and got it roughly in the right position that I needed. And then using the move brush, whenever we're doing large proportional changes, the move brush is a really good brush. You can see the resolution does not really matter all that much. It's actually better to work with lower res geometry so you can move a little bit faster. You can see with Damien Standard, then maybe I'm going to, if I hold down Alt, I'm going to actually dig in with just by clicking and sculpting. And if I hold down Alt, I'm going to pull out edges. So I'm either pushing in or holding edges. Right there, I just went ahead and converted things to Dynamesh real quick. And if we go under Geometry and go to Dynamesh, you can see I was using a resolution of about 288 for that. I'll just keep pushing this forward a little bit more. So I was trying to build like a chest with a little bit of a rib cage. And then there, if we put it on the gizmo tool, if you hold down control and you drag out a shape, if there's no mask on it, it'll actually make a copy of the thing. So that's what's happening here whenever I do that. Just drag out a copy. The other thing is after you've done this with the gizmo tool on here, I drag out the copy, and then if you go into the gearbox icon, you can actually pick one of these primitives. So what I did there was I chose a sphere primitive. It is pretty low res, but we're going to convert that over to Dynamesh, so not a big deal. So I converted that shape over real quick. This is all still one model. I made the shape for this, pulled it forward, did a little bit of scaling on it to get like a stomach shape. And then I duplicated the shape again, and I'm trying to build the mass out for what the lower portion of the back would be. Just pushing and pulling that around, duplicated the object again, and then just rotated it into position so I can get something for a pelvis. And then doing this over here on this side, another sphere, and then just scaling it into this shape really quickly just to get something for a leg shape. Okay, and then you can see on my interface, I have this mirror and weld, and mirror will just mirror something over in one direction. ZBrush does a mirror and weld from one direction only, so that's why I use the mirror a lot, and it's going to mirror and weld from this direction over. So that's how I just made one leg over here, got rid of my mask, did a mirror and weld, and then went ahead and Dynameshed it all together. So you can also see that I've got polygroups, the poly frame on. I have the line off so we don't have to see this, so you can turn that off. And now we can just see the colors for the polygroups. And then I'm going to use that to my advantage. If we turn on this groups option with Dynamesh, it'll actually take these polygroups and it'll separate them into different, well, it's still a one-piece model. So let's take a look at this under the subtool. So you can see it's one model. But then with that groups option, whenever I Dynamesh, it will separate them into different islands. So let's keep pushing on here until I get to a certain point. So I'm doing a little sculpting on there. Got a little ahead of myself on this polygroup thing. So you can see here is where I finally Dynameshed and turn on that option for groups. And it doesn't look like much. If I turn the polyframe off, you can see it's going to give you this really kind of thin line, and you could, just smooth along there. And that's what I'm going to start doing. I'm going to just start smoothing out the results of that just a little bit. And then you start to see more separation between the parts that they've got on there. So I'll keep pushing this over a little bit more and did a little bit more sculpting just using the clay buildup tool and trying to build some mass in there. What I did a little bit in the back at this point here was starting to build some muscle fibers so I can start building some glutes. So he actually has a hindquarter on the back of this thing. So it's a matter of using these different tools. You can flow in and out of these to get the different shapes that you've got. And I did find it useful. Let's see if we push this a little bit forward to get towards the end of this. And I did a little bit of work on the back as well to get some of those muscle forms kind of roughed in like that. I did find it useful that you could keep these parts and pieces separate like this. It might make things a little bit more malleable, and maybe it makes it a little bit easier for you to manipulate things. And so I've got things at this point here, and I could show you this real quick. With the move brush, we'll change some of the proportion stuff. And then it's pretty easy to make polygroups on here. So we can actually use our masking function. If we hold down Control and we paint out a mask on here, let's do this. And I want to get this separated off in its own part or its own piece. So if I hold down Control, I can paint on here. If I want to subtract the mask, I can hold down Control and Alt together, and that'll get rid of it. Okay. And then if I want to go ahead and smooth the mask, let me get this shape going a little bit more. I want to make sure that there's some separation between these parts right here like this. So subtracting Control and Alt. And then if I want to add, just hold down Control. And now I'm going to smooth the mask out. So if I hold down Control and then click on this, it'll smooth the mask. If I hit Control and Alt, it will tighten up the mask. So sometimes by smoothing and then tightening back up a mask, you can control the shape a little bit more like that. Okay. So again, Control will paint the mask. Control and Alt gets rid of the mask. Control tap on the mask will smooth it. Control plus Alt tap on there will tighten that up. Let me fix this just a little bit there, like that. And then now to turn that into a polygroup, all I have to do is hit Control W, and then that makes a new polygroup. So let's go back to that option that we had under geometry and Dynamesh, and we've got groups turned on. Now all you have to do is remesh. So usually with Dynamesh, I usually just do this twice. I control drag. Let's not do that real quick. Let me hit undo, and let's see what's going on here with this. Let's hit undo to get this back, and it looks like it killed my undo history on there. Okay, great. I think it's because I've got a little bit going on with my system and I'm taxing things while I'm doing a recording. So let me just go ahead and did a little bit of an operation on there and hit Control and drag on there. And you can see now it's going to make these different parts and pieces. Why is this valuable? So I can hold down Control and Shift and I can click on a polygroup and I can hide it. So now I can just work on just this section here. Let's say I wanted to pull out this edge. Like I was saying with Damien Standard, I could hold down Alt and I could pull out an edge like this. And then if I just click and drag, I'm going to dig in. So it produces a really nice look, and we can get some of the overall forms kind of moving. I'm just holding down Shift now to kind of smooth some of this stuff out. And then if I want to mask this, it's really easy. It's hidden everything else. So I hold down Control, tap on the screen, and it just masks whatever is visible. To bring everything back, Control Shift, get used to this Control Shift stuff. You're going to use it a lot inside of ZBrush. Control Shift, tap in the open viewport like this here, and it brings back everything that I've got, right? If I wanted to invert the mask, I could Control tap the screen like that. Or if you're used to Photoshop, you can hit Control I, and that will invert your mask, right? So maybe that makes it really easy for you to be able to select things and get things kind of masked off like that, right? I'm going to hold down Control Shift and I'll select this part of the torso. If I tap P, I can turn off perspective real quick like this. And then masking. What if I want to do something a little bit easier and make a lasso? So we hold down Control, we come up here in the upper left-hand corner, and then I'm going to click this lasso, and now I can hold down Control, and I can drag out a shape like this to make a lasso, right? And then same thing we did before. If we're holding on Control and we do Control Alt, I can subtract from the mask, okay? Let's go ahead and hit Control W like we did before. That'll make a polygroup for us. I'm going to bring everything back. Again, Control Shift, click on the viewport, open viewport like that, and that brings everything back. All right. So now I've got polygroups. I've got it on Dynamesh. I'm going to do the group. I'm going to Control drag, and then that gives me my new parts and my new pieces that I've got. Okay. So that makes it nice and easy to work with. All right. So, let's see this. Let's say we want to make our life a little bit easier. We don't want to keep doing this selection thing and then masking everything. And what if you want these things to actually be separate parts and pieces? We can do that as well. So let's go to subtool area. So open that up over here. Then we need to go to the subtool area, and they have a split. And we can do this group split. Let's just watch what happens with this right now. Right now, the name of it is PM3D, Polymesh 3D, Sphere 3D1. It's a long name for just basically a sphere that we have. And then now watch if we go ahead and go to the split area and do group split, it will split it apart for us. I have it, I need to turn the visibility on everything. So now we've got this, and it might make sense for us to actually name this thing. So maybe I call this like torso, and maybe this is stomach, like that. These would be my legs. And if you want to reorder this stuff, you can click and drag it like this. This would be like my pelvis. It's up to you what you want to name the parts and pieces and stuff like that, right? And so I've already got the arms. The arms are all together. That's just like what we were doing before. I'll turn perspective on so we can see what's going on here. And so now, if I just want to sculpt on these individual parts and pieces, it's really easy for me just to select them. If I hold down Alt and then click on them, I can cycle between which part and piece that I'm actually going to work on. So this might actually speed things up for you. I'll put it on Damien Standard. I'm just going to kind of just do a little bit more sculptural work on this right here like this, just to show you what we can do with this. I'm going to put it on the move brush by tapping 4 from my hotkeys that I have. So I can move that around just like that, right? And if you ever want to, let's say I can do a mask. I'm going to hold down Control and put this back on the freehand. If we wanted to do something like a neck, we could hold down Control, click on that, Control, click on the screen. That will inverse that. And then I'm going to put it on the move brush, make it really, really large. Tap S, and then drag up. And then I'll just drag out a shape for a neck. Like that. And you know, I'm curious about this. I just drug this thing out. We've already got a mask on here. If I control tap it like that, if I hit control W, I was hoping it would grab a little bit more than just that. But okay, so I don't want to control drag just yet and do Dynamesh. I'm worried about that causing an issue. So let's just control drag. That makes a new shape. I can smooth it out just like that. And I guess it's not a big deal to, just paint a mask on this thing real quickly. And I am going pretty fast, so I'm being pretty sloppy with this, but I don't think you, at this stage, you don't really have tons to worry about. It doesn't have to be like super, super clean because you're just making shapes and then you start to refine these shapes on that. So I'll hit Control W. As you split this thing apart, I would watch this. You got to watch each part and piece because this was the parent thing that everything got split apart from. I think it still holds the values. So it's got this Dynamesh thing already set up for me. Now, if I hold down Alt and click on this, actually it retained to all the other parts and pieces. Okay, so that's cool. So then now we've got things drug out for a neck, right? So the next thing I wanted to show you is like, what if we want to get to this point where we're going to combine all these things together? That's pretty easy to do as well. I'm going to make a new folder. So we'll go to new folder and I'll call this just body like this. I'll drag all the parts and pieces into there just like that, clicking and dragging. Now, if we're on this other part, you can actually hide the entire folder. Now that we've got a folder, we can do operations on the folder. So you can click the folder, you can open it, you can close it, you can rename it. If you rename it, you got to go to the little gearbox icon and then do rename folder. But you can see there's a bunch of different things that you can do on here. You can transpose set, which will automatically select everything so you can move it with the transpose tool as multiple parts and pieces. There's just a lot of that you can do in here. So the thing that I'm going to do is this. You could merge the folder, and if you merge the folder, it's going to just take all the parts and pieces, make a new object. It won't fuse them together, and maybe that's what you want. It's up to you. Or you can do this Boolean folder. If you do a Boolean folder, it's actually going to take the parts and pieces, fuse them together, and then it'll, get rid of the inner parts. So I'm gonna use that option. I'm gonna say Boolean folder. take a second. It looked like it has some kind of issue on there. Sometimes if I've got parts and pieces that are like sitting directly on top of one another, it can cause issues. So let me just go ahead and I'm just gonna delete these real quick. I'm gonna delete this. Okay. So I wasn't expecting that to happen. I don't really want to take the time to clean everything up. But again, I would have to go through and there's ways to find out what part might be sitting directly on top of the other one. My suspicion is that it's probably this neck thing that's up here. So I'm going to use that option we talked about where we just merge the folder. So here we go. It just made this new merged version that we've got. It hides the folder and all the parts and pieces that are in there. So that makes it nice and clean for us. Okay. And then the next step would be actually taking these parts and pieces after we've manipulated them and then joining them together and then doing a Dynamesh on that. So I'm going to go to geometry. I'm going to go to Dynamesh. I'm not going to use the groups option this time. I'm going to put the resolution up to, let's try like 350, something like that. And I'll go ahead and click Dynamesh. And you can see it's going to retain the polygroup information and merge everything together. So symmetry, tap X for symmetry. I'm going to go ahead and hold down Shift and I can start to smooth these things out that we've got on here like this. Okay. And you can see I've got a little stragglers for some of these polygroups and stuff like that. No big deal. I could clean that stuff up. But I did want to show you this option. Okay, so there's a lot of different smooth brushes that exist out there. While you're working with high resolution Dynamesh, if you tap the command key for the light box, if we go to brush and then we go to smooth, let's double click this smooth area. There's this smooth stronger. So let's double click on that and take a look at that. And if we hold down shift, we can smooth this out. It's going to be like super, super strong, just like it says, smooth stronger. I actually put it on my interface. You can see when we hold down shift, there's this weighted smooth mode, and this exists under a brush. Anytime you see something on the interface, you hold down control over the top of it, you can see at the bottom of it, it says this button path thing. So let's see where that sits. It's under brush, smooth brush, modifiers, weight smooth mode. So I was using this enough to see that a regular smooth brush, if I hold down shift, it switches to the smooth brush. The normal mode for this is 0. And you can see if we hover our cursor over this, it'll tell you what it actually is. 0 is the standard. 1 is actually the stronger brush. And then if you put it all the way up to 6, it's going to be this smooth groups border. So let's see this. If I hit the comma key again, so if we do this smooth groups, double click on that, hit OK for that. If I hold down shift, you can see it's on this mode 6. What this does is actually takes a look at your polygroups and it'll make a nice crisp line out of that polygroup difference. So that's another reason why you might be interested in this polygroup stuff and try to get a hold of that. It just opens up a whole new world of possibilities for you. So again, we got these little stragglers that you have to get rid of for that. If this is actually on the same one as that, no, it doesn't. So if I hold on Control Shift, I'll click on this one, click it again, and then I see this little tiny part, and I can hold on Control Shift, click on that little thing, and to get the inverse of whatever we see, I'm going to hold on Control Shift and then drag in the open viewport like this, and then that gives me the inverse. Now, just like we did with the mask thing, if we hit Control W, it'll make a polygroup out of whatever is visible. If you got a mask, it'll make a polygroup out of whatever is masked. Okay. Now I'm going to hold on Control Shift, bring everything back. So I just got rid of that little problem that we had with that little tiny thing. We could do the same thing up here with this. And if I click these right there like that, I'm going to hold on Control Shift, drag for the inverse of that. I want to join to this. So now that I've got this hidden, if I hold down Control Shift and click on that, it's going to add to it. So let's do the inverse of that. And let's see, I'm going to hit Control W. It'll make a polygroup out of everything that's visible. Okay. And I know that I've set this up for a hotkey for myself. Control Shift W will make a polygroup out of islands. And what do I mean by that? So polygroups, we've got this auto group that we said we'll just look at this island thing, and this is the hotkey that I set up for it. There's this group visible, Control W, that usually will group whatever's visible to make an entire polygroup out of that. But if I do this one, it makes new polygroups out of each one. But I do have an issue where, what if I want these legs to be the same polygroup again? If you're using Dynamesh, not a big deal. We'll just use this mirror and weld, and then now we got everything back. So this workflow, I know I'm throwing a whole lot at you, but after you get a hold of this workflow, you've got a whole lot of options at your disposal. You've got the ability to make shapes very, very quickly. You've got the ability to show and hide parts very quickly. You can get really smooth edges at times when you're looking for that. So it just, again, it just opens up a whole lot, right? Um, and again, if I'm smoothing, if I don't want this operation on there anymore, since I put this down on here, I'm going to put this down to 1, which will turn that back into this smooth stronger, and I'll just do something like that, and I can start to smooth out the results that I see there. So then maybe I'm getting a combination of the crisp edge, and then I'm getting stuff to be nice and smooth on there. So this next part of the video is going to be talking about after we've got our body roughed out and we're ready to start really honing in on the head, how can we approach that? I wanted to show you some older videos that I have. So if we take a look at my YouTube channel and you go to the videos section and you type in image, you should be able to find these 2 videos pretty easy. The first one says ZBrush 017 concepting and ZBrush image plane. And that's an older video that I put together, and it shows you how to take a head and you can get it in there and model off the top of the image plane. The other one that I'd like to draw your attention to is this '09 introduction to ZBrush image planes. And on that one, I'm going to hop on over to it and just take a look at this real quick. On this one, I'm showing you 3 different methods inside of ZBrush on how to add images into the program. The first that we could talk about is Spotlight. That's probably the most typical version that most people will be able to use. And it just lets you kind of freely put the image on the background wherever you want. Now, the drawback to that one is you do need to save some camera data to make sure that it lines up with it a little bit later. That's probably the one that I like the most, but me being a longtime user, I don't really care about like the ins and outs of all the different things I got to do to get that to work for me and be able to get back to it with a consistent result. The other method is this reference view method. And I'm really not sure why all these different methods actually exist, but it's a different way of doing it. It's got its pros and cons for that one. And then the last one is this floor grid method, which lets you put in images for like a full character, and you could do a front, side, top, left, right. So that's kind of like the Cadillac version of things. So if you want to know those workflows, go ahead and take a look at those videos. They're pretty extensive, and I'll show you the ins and outs of the entire process. What I wanted to show you though today is something that's just a little bit different. Um, I am using what would be considered like image planes, but I'm inside of ZBrush. And this is after we've got our character nice and roughed out. I've tested the proportions, I've pushed it to engine, and I could actually take this proxy model that you see before us, and it's not super detailed, but I could push that off to other departments. They could start to do some skeleton building with it, actually put some weighting on it, and they could push the pipeline forward and get other departments working with this while it allows us to kind of go off to the side and really go to town and make the high res mesh on there. So this would be at that part of that process after everything's been kind of roughed out to that degree, and everything's working from there. And then we're going to isolate and just work on the head for this, okay? And so in order for me to do that, let me go ahead and hide these pieces. All I did was I actually appended a cube, and inside of ZBrush, you can actually go and turn on transparency. And if you tap P, you can turn on and off perspective. So ZBrush doesn't really have a true camera system. So if you want to get an orthographic view from the front or the side like this, you can tap P to turn on and off perspective. Then if I rotate my camera gently and then get it towards like a front facing thing, if I hold down shift while I'm doing that, then it's going to snap to like a front view, right? And if I started going to the side and I held down shift, it's going to snap to a side view. The other thing that they've added to this thing is this, this mannequin head up top here. So we could actually take this and go to the front and then move it around, and you can go to the side for that. Okay, so I'm just gonna zoom in nice and tight on here, turn P off for perspective, and then I've got something that I could use for the front view of this. Okay, so I'm gonna get a screen grab out of here. I actually like using the snipping tool that exists inside of Windows. So if you don't know about this tool, you can hit the Windows key and type in snipping and then find the snipping tool. I've got mine set up to where I can actually do a screen grab and it's set to rectangle. So if I do new, it'll turn the screen a little bit dark like this. Then I can go and then I can drag a marquee around uh, the area that I want to take a screen grab of. So I use this a lot for doing emails and making posts and all kinds of stuff. So it's pretty useful, right? So we've got this view here. I'm going to hop on over to Photoshop, and then this is what we're going to eventually start looking at and building. But I'll say File New, like this. I'll just take whatever the size of this thing is and go ahead and create it like that. And go ahead and hit Paste. And then so that's going to give me something for my front view. Um, I'm going to go ahead and go to Image. I'm going to go to Canvas Size, and I'll make this a percentage. Let's do canvas size like this, and then I'm going to put this over here to the left and take the width and make this 200% like that. But if I hit Control Alt and then minus, I can zoom the canvas out. Or if I do plus, I can go up and down with this canvas. So I'm just going to try to get it a little bit smaller, open this up right here in the corner like that. And so then now I should be able to get myself a side view. So let's go hop back over to ZBrush, and then I'm going to rotate towards the side, and then hold down Shift while we do this. That'll snap to the side view. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the snipping tool again. I'll just click New, and then I'm going to go ahead and drag from this corner right here to here like this. And then let's hop back over to Photoshop, and I'll go ahead and paste this right in here. And then I'll push this over to the side like that. And I could merge this down at that point. And I've got my two different views. So what I would suggest to you is that we're going to build this front and side template that's going to give us the opportunity to go ahead and do an illustration inside of Photoshop so we can actually build a concept for ourselves that we're going to build off the top of. So I'm actually going to take this, I'm going to go to image, and I'm going to go image size, and I'm going to do a width of 4096 like that. Hit OK. I'm going to zoom out a little bit like this, and I'm going to go and say image, and I'm going to image, canvas size, because I'm going to change the size of the canvas, and I'll do 2048 like that. And I'll just go ahead and say proceed, and then that will just chop that off a little bit. But what I've done is I've built a canvas that it is now twice as wide as it is high. So if I tap M and put it on the marquee tool, and if I put this on just normal, I should be able to click and drag out, hold down shift, and I can make a perfect square, and I should be able to drag out like that. And it should make me an image that is 2048 by 2048. So if I copy this, Control C, if I hit Control N to make a new document and just hit create, and I paste that in there, and I'll tap Control E, and that will merge everything down, you can see I've got a document that's 2048 by 2048. So that's going to make it really easy for me to be able to build a square image that I can push into either Maya, or I can put it inside a ZBrush, and I know I'm going to get very consistent results on things. My suggestion to you is to keep things in this power of 2 and keep things nice and square. You can use odd sizes if you want, but you're going to end up having to take that work, and then you have to shift it left, and you have to shift it right, up, down. There's a whole lot of work involved with this. So I'm trying to keep my life as simple as I possibly can. So I'm trying to just use this square format. So you can see if I shift this over here, if I click and drag with the marquee tool and hold down shift, I should be able to just snap right over here and hit copy like this, and I can paste this in here, and you can see I'm going to get consistent results between the two of these things here. Okay. All right. So that's how you can get yourself set up with this document and get yourself moving. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And then this is what I was basically building whenever I was done kind of illustrating this thing. So I do have all the color kind of set on one thing. I've got this background thing back here like this, and then I've got all my shading is on here with my different kind of line work and stuff like that. So if I went through each one of these things and built this up, you can see the line work that was produced for this, and then just the color information that was on here for this. Okay. The one thing that I wanted to draw to your attention whenever you're building these type of files is that you want to make sure that your features all line up. And usually what I try to do is I have what I consider as my definitive image. So I have an image that I'm going to be pulling the most information from. And if I'm doing a portrait sculpture, for me, that's usually the front view is the area that I pull the most information from. I want to make sure that that likeness or these forms that I'm building, they make the most sense from the front view, right? And because I'm making my own concept, I can easily make sure that the image is symmetrical. So um, what I was showing you before, if we take a marquee and we drag it out, hold down shift, and then that should get me right in the middle of this thing. If I hit Control H to show my different rulers, if I hit Control R, I can actually show the rulers. And I would click and drag out, and then Photoshop is pretty nice about like when you get a selection and things like that, it will snap right in the middle of this. So if I take this selection over here, I don't have one of these rulers over here or these guides. If I click and drag over, you'll kind of feel it right in the middle to snap to it. So I'm going to snap there. And then if I needed to snap into the middle of that, I could do that. I was going to drag it up to get rid of that one. And I'll take this one. I'll just leave it actually. So you can hit Control H to hide those things, but this is what I built for the symmetry on this. Photoshop also has with their brushes, if I tap B for my brush, you can turn symmetry on. So you can draw with symmetry. Unfortunately for me, like my favorite brush that I like to draw with is not supported with the symmetry. So I was using an airbrush for a lot of that stuff. You can turn symmetry off or on. You can do a vertical, horizontal. There's a lot of options for this, and you can actually move the symmetry line. So what I ended up doing was hit Control H. I made this, this guide that we have here, then set the symmetry and set the symmetry plane right down to the center of this. That allowed me to draw the front. I focused on the front, at the beginning, made sure that that was nice and good. And then you can see I made a new layer, and I just click right here to make a new layer. And then I just took a brush, I made it red. So let's go choose our color like this here. And depending on your brush, if you're inside of Photoshop, you can actually click and hold down shift and you can just drag out. I didn't realize I have symmetry on. Let me go ahead and turn symmetry off for this, like that. And I can click and I can just drag out like that. So I'm doing that with a mouse right now. If I do it with a pen, I can actually do pressure sensitivity on there. So if you need to get some kind of landmark, you can just continue that on. Now I don't really necessarily have anything specific for that part right there, but that's basically how it's done. The important parts of the features that I want to make sure that I'm hitting are some of these things for this is where the mouth hits right here where the two lips come together, the bottom of the lip, the top of the lip. I've got some information for where the chin goes, the bottom of this goiter that he has, the bottom of the nose. Then I've got a little bit of information for the corner of the nose and where that pulls out to right here, the bottom of this eye bag. You can see the corner of the eye here. Another one that's good is this right here where your tear duct is, and you want to pull that across there. And I've got the top of the ear, and I've got the top of his brow structure that you see there. So again, those are going to be landmarks for me, and they're not going to be perfect. And what I was saying, like why I'm going to take one image and I'm going to put more emphasis on that over everything else, it's very, very difficult for anybody, even the best concept artists, to draw in 3D. And nobody's drawing in 3D when you're drawing in a two-dimensional format, but to actually draw two-dimensional images that actually work in 3D is difficult. What I would say about this process is that I think people are becoming more and more accustomed to 3D being part of the 2D concept process, right? If you start with a three-dimensional object and you draw over the top of that, you already know that there's elements of that is actually working in 3D. And so that becomes a little bit more attractive to companies whenever you want to push a design and move it from the concept stage into 3D. You actually start off and you've got some kind of template, right? And so I kicked those two images out. That's the process I used to build this. You can see how I got the images out by just marqueing around this and then taking this. If I want to do a copy merge, I can do Control Shift C. Control N will make a brand new document. It's going to take a second for that. Hit enter. I'll hit Control V and Control E to flatten that. And then I'm just going to do Control Shift S and I can save that. And I'll save that out as I'm actually using flattened Photoshop documents. There's a couple different formats that ZBrush will take. The easiest one is a flattened Photoshop file. So what I kicked out was a front view and then a side view whenever I was done with my illustration or my concept. And then let's hop back over to ZBrush. I'm going to show you what the next stages for that was. So if I go ahead and click this front view, I'm going to go ahead and hide the cube that we've got here. You can see what we've got. And then I also have the side view. Now, because I did the cube and we built everything off the cube, it made it a whole lot easier for me to line everything up. Let me show you the next steps for this, okay? So I'm going to take the cube that we got off to the side. I'm on transparent. You don't have to have that, but might be helpful for you. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit append. And I'm going to append a plane 3D like this. And you can see it's going to come in nice and straight like that. If we want, we can just go use that to our advantage, and I'll just take this and I'll just rename this to front. I'll just do image like that. I'll tap W to put it on the move, the gizmo tool. I'll push it up here, and for some reason the visibility of this cube turned off. Let me go ahead and turn that back on. And then let's take this plane, we'll push it up right here, we'll scale it down, and I don't have to be like 100% accurate with this. I'm just going to eyeball it and get it pretty close. So I think that looks pretty good, like right there, right? And then I'm going to push it back to the back of the cube right about there, okay? All right, so there's the front image that we've got. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this, and I will rename it right off the bat. And let's just say side, like that, image. Okay, so I can rotate this. If I hold down shift, I can rotate it and snap it to degrees of increments right there like that. I'll go ahead and push this to the very back just like that. Come to the side view, and then I'm just going to push this and I'm going to line it up right about there. So that should give me everything that I need for my two image planes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hide this cube, and now we've got this little half cube thing that we've got going on here. I can turn on perspective now at this point. And then to get the textures into here, all you need to do is go and say texture. You can say import, and then you need to navigate to where this sits. So I've actually have on here, I've got my image planes right here. So I'm going to go ahead and select this front, hit open for that. It'll add it. I'm going to go back to texture and say import, and I'm going to do the side image just like this. So now I've got the two images put in here. Okay. All right. The next thing is adding the images to these planes. Let's go to the front view real quick like this. And if we scroll down, there's an area within here and it says texture map. You can click on here and go find the texture that you want to apply to this. Now don't feel like you did something wrong. I really don't know the reason for this. ZBrush has their UVs are flipped from a different direction than everybody else does. Not sure why. I don't want to even fight it. I'm just going to go with it. So if we've got it in the gizmo tool, I can just take this, hold down shift, and then rotate, and then I'll just rotate my image 180 degrees like that. So now we got this on here. I'm going to put it back on draw, hold down alt, and then click on this one. So now we can go to the side view. I'm going to go ahead and say texture map, and then we'll go ahead and click on the side view. Same problem with this one. So we'll put it on rotate, hold down shift, and then rotate 180 degrees. Okay, so now we're good to go. We can leave things the way that they are. Now, I did want these images to be a little bit brighter. If you change your material to something like sketch toy plastic, you can see that it lightens everything up. So this is getting a little bit more advanced. So some of the people that know how to fill with color and things like that, this will be for you. So if you're fine with the image being darker, you can just leave it where it's at. If you want to understand what to do for this next part, I'm going to try to explain it to you. So what's going on here, something about this, whenever you have a texture on here, even if I take this piece of geometry and I can fill it with a material. So like right up here, I can fill with mRGB, which is material and red, green, and blue. I can do that, or I can just fill with color for poly painting, and I could just fill with a material. If I put it on just material and I say fill object like this, and I put it back to something different, it doesn't stick. So I do have a little bit of a workaround for that, okay? So I'm gonna put this back on this toy plastic thing here. So what I can do is when I use polypaint information, I can fill with polypaint data, and I can also fill with a material at that point. So knowing that, what I'm going to do is this. If I turn on the polyframe, you can see here's the actual geometry for this. And if we fill this plane with the texture map and convert the texture map data to polypaint data, there's not very many polygons, so we can just take a look and we can see what that's going to do. So I need to find polypaint, which is right here, and then they do have polypaint from texture. So if I do that, I need to be on this MR or this RGB. Let me hit undo for that, and you can see what's going on here. Pretty low res, and the reason for that is we don't have enough polygons, right? It's actually doing the job we're asking it to do, but it's just really, really low res, right? So if I go under geometry and I divide it, I can divide this multiple times and I can get a whole lot more geometry on here, and that'll solve the problem. If we leave this SMT on here, that will be a smooth mesh modifier, so it'll smooth out the corners. So if we want this to be perfectly square, turn that off. I'm going to divide it up. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll get like 6 divisions on here. Okay. And then now I'm going to go back to the poly paint area. And now I'm going to say poly paint from texture. And now it just filled it. It doesn't look like anything changed, but as I rotate this around, you can see the resolution drops. That's just a feature of ZBrush to, speed things up when you get subdivision levels. So it's working as expected. And then now that I've got this on polypaint data, I can put this on M for material, and I should be able to say fill object, and now it should fill it with this material. Please note that we do have this RGB intensity up to 100 whenever we're doing the color and the material. So now whenever I switch over to the red wax material, that sticks for me. So if that's what you want, you can do that process again. Let's just go through it one more time. I'll just go here. I'll go to geometry. Then I'm going to take this divisions, divide it up to where it's got about 6 divisions. And then I'll go and I will say polypaint from texture. Hit undo. Let's try this time. Let's try mRGB. Let's fill with material and the poly paint and see if we can do it all at the same time. And let's click off to the red wax. Didn't do it. So let's put this back on this thing here. Not really sure why. Maybe it's a bug. I'm not sure. We'll put on material, say fill object, and let's go back to the red wax material. Okay, so everything's sticking for us now, and now we can put this back on the matte cap gray. And then here's what I've noticed about that. And this is why I wanted it to be a little bit brighter, right? If we've got this transparent on, which we've been working with, we can go to the front view and we can go to the side view. Let me actually select this model and tap P to turn perspective off. Now we've got a method of going to a front and side view very quickly on things, and we can start to match things up as far as proportions go. So what I did was I took a Damien standard brush, and then I started to work with the proportions that you see here, and I started to sketch out where some of these forms are based off of this view. So if I start to push this forward, you can see I sketched in the lips just a little bit. I pulled out some shapes, and I'm either pulling some stuff out or pushing it in, and just trying to give myself some landmarks where maybe the nose sits. And then you can see there's a pretty big gap that we've got here between the concept and what I've got modeled here. So I'm taking the move brush and I'm moving it just like this, and I'm getting some of those proportions down with that at that point. If I move to the side view and take a look at what's going on with the side view, I know I did this as well for this. So we can use the move brush to move things around, and that'll be fine, but it's only going to grab like a local area, like maybe some fall off right in here. There is another move brush type that we can use, and it'll basically take the entire model and it'll shift it over. So if we tap B within through here and then go M for our brushes, there is this move infinite depth. And if we do that and we click and drag, it drags everything forward and it keeps the fall off of the brush and it keeps everything consistent going across the model. So whenever you're pulling out these forms for the very first time from your side view, that might work pretty well for you. Okay. And again, on what I was saying, like the side view is only to get me like roughly like, hey, here's where some of these landmarks hit and here's where some of these landmarks sit. And so I drug all this stuff out, fixed up, I think at some point fixed up the ear just a little bit more and started to do a little bit more detail in the ear like that. And so you can see that from this view like that. The last thing I wanted to show you about this process and how I was telling you we've got this definitive image and I'm just using the side view to kind of get myself the Z depth going back and forth for this. If we put it on the move brush, and I've got this on my interface up here where I can move in X, Y, and Z currently, and that's the default. I can actually turn this off and I can just say I only want the brush to move in the Z dimension on there like that. And I can only just push this thing back and forth. And again, if you're using my interface, it's right up here. But if not, the button path, you can see if I hold down control and click over this to see where it sits, all this exists under transform. So transform modifiers. You can see we've got, let's go back here, transform, and then modifiers. This is where these buttons actually sit for this. So I've got symmetry turned on, and then I can just get everything looking pretty good from the front view. And then I'm like, okay, I need to match this up a little bit closer on the side view. And then maybe the lips are going back just a little bit too far and I need to get this matched up and through here. This is how you can use that definitive view, get most of the work from that, and then use the side view to try to get the rest of the information there. And so once you've got these landmarks laid out, you've got yourself a pretty good template to start building off the top of, and you know you've done your best effort to go ahead and capture those forms that you're trying to generate. Um, I would say if you're working with an art director, and there's some questions about proportions, I think you being able to demonstrate that you've gone through these steps to ensure that you're hitting your landmarks and hitting your primary forms and everything's laid out in the right proportions, I think this is going to do you a whole lot of service to be able to set this up and go through this process like this. Okay, now that we have everything roughed out and we have everything set up for the concepts for our head and we're ready to start moving into the secondary stage, the last thing I wanted to show you for this section is how do we get the head in a position where we can get that separated from the body and get that in a good position for us to move around that freely and just work on the head and sculpt on that. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and hold down Alt tap on the body and that should be able to select it. That's the little shortcut to go into the subtools, and instead of going here and selecting things like that, you should be able to just hold down Alt and then click on it like that. Okay, I do have the solo mode on here to just isolate this. I have a hotkey for this and I use this all the time. I made the hotkey Alt S. It's up to you what you want to use for that, but I would highly encourage you to be able to make something like that as well. We've already taken a look at how we can go ahead and build a mask for things. I have symmetry turned on, so I'm just going to tap X. I'm holding down Control on here, so I'm just going to paint right along the edge of this. And it's okay if I go a little bit over. I'll go ahead and erase that. We've looked at that already too, and how we can make a mask for things. If you wanted to use the lasso tool, we looked at that as well, and it's possible that you could use that. I'm just a little bit more familiar with using the brush method on here. So again, just Control to get the bulk of the form done. like this. And then now if I want to erase out any parts, I'm going to hold down Control and Alt, and I'm just going to paint right in through here like this, right there like that. And we already looked at if we hold down Control and tap, that will smooth the mask. If we hold down Control and Alt and then tap on that, we can tighten up the mask like that. Okay. All right. So I do want to, I'm going to keep this whole thing together, and I'm going to make a new version where I'm going to split this off. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this like that, and I'll just rename this head like that. I'm going to make a polygroup out of this, and if you remember from what we talked about before, if you hit Control W, that will make a polygroup out of this. I can turn on the polyframe, and we can take a look at that right there like that. All right, and we also looked at if we hold on Control Shift, we click on something with a polygroup, we can hide everything else. Nice and easy for that. On my interface down here, there's delete hidden. Again, if you hold down control on here, you can see where this actually sits. So that's the button path tool geometry delete hidden if you want to know where that button actually sits. So I'm just going to delete hidden just like that. And since we're already in a Dynamesh mode, we should be able to hold down control, drag, and remesh. Now, if it doesn't do that for you, something happened with Dynamesh and it needs to be returned back on. If you want to go to geometry, just check this area. And I don't have much topology that we're doing for this right now. Actually, I'm going to hit undo, and I'm going to up the resolution of this so it's a little bit finer. I'm going to push it up to maybe 500, somewhere there, 600. And you can see we've got a whole lot more resolution to work with. And let's go ahead and I'll turn off the polyframe on there. Now I'm just going to go through and I'm going to just lightly smooth along this part of the model. I'm going to hit undo real quick. Okay, I didn't want to. I wanted to make sure I had symmetry turned on. I just didn't see that little red tick. So okay, so I'm just going to smooth this out a little bit. And if you remesh again, then it starts to smooth out this area along the edge here just a little bit more. You might have to get to an angle like this. I'm just trying to make a little bit of a nicer transition on here. And you can see how rough everything was from the previous stage. Now, when you up-res something inside a ZBrush, you're going to have to just lightly smooth the surface to get rid of this polygonal kind of look. The other thing that you can do is use this clay polish, and clay polish actually sits right above Dynamesh right here. I've got it on my interface there. You can see that. And clay polish will do a smoothing algorithm, but it takes a look at some of the edges that you have on there. So usually when I'm up-resing a Dynamesh model, I actually use that as an option, and it gives me some pretty nice results. Still holds the forms, and then I'll just remesh again, just like that. And then I'll keep smoothing this out. And I'll just start looking for some opportunities where it looks really, really rough, just like that, right? And maybe it's a little bit too crisp in through there. And then now to just finish things up, I'm either going to use the Damien Standard brush, which is really nice for carving in like this. And if I hold down Alt, I can pull and make edges. Depending on the size of the brush that you have, you can get a whole lot of really cool results with this, just like that, right? And you can do a whole lot smaller things. So I do know the lips are getting a little bit tore up there, so maybe I want to define these just a little bit more. Maybe if I hold down Alt, I was digging in at that point. Now if I hold Alt, I can pull shapes out. So maybe I want that ridge to be a little bit more pronounced. And maybe I want this ridge to be a little bit more pronounced here, like this. And I'll just remesh. So again, the resolution that I'm working at right now, if we want to do these bigger forms, it's not too bad. But you know what? I do want this to be a little bit more crisp, and I do want a little bit more resolution in through here. So I'm going to just raise this up to somewhere in here, maybe around 800 or so. And I'll just remesh again, and now I can just smooth this out and maybe remesh. And so you're gonna just get used to this process. You're gonna do it quite a bit, and you can see now I can get this to be a lot more smoother where I need it to be smoother on the shapes. And we can do stuff like this. The only thing is you just need to make sure you're not going too high with your resolution right out the bat, because if you go too high, then it does become still more difficult for you to actually work on these different forms. So think of working on these things in stages, And again, we're just trying to work our way up to get ourselves to the point where we're going to start working on medium level details. So I'm not going to do too much in here. And in the next video section, we will take a look at how we can build the eye structure. That's the first place that I'm going to worry about. But right now, I just wanted to get some of these major forms and get those ready to go. And if I hit Shift R, I can do a nice little BPR render. So that's going to close out this section for this series. Like I was saying, the next one, we're going to be taking a look at how we can use ZBrush to build all of our secondary forms, and we'll really concentrate and work on the eye. And I'll see you in the next video.